Hi, welcome to another episode of the Place OS podcast. I'm here with Sabrina, as always, but this time we also have Will, our technical director. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey,
So, this one, we're going to focus on slightly different use cases and stakeholders, more of the IT stakeholder, the benefits to the IT stakeholder, and just talk about how PlaceOS relates to those areas. So, Will, I often start these interviews off with a very high level question, and that is, what industry trends are you noticing right now?
Yeah. So in terms of what I'm seeing when I work with our clients and partners, we're seeing a lot of uh, cloud IoT becoming more popular. So this is stuff like major cloud providers like Microsoft and Google and Amazon, like delivering solutions for IoT devices and sensors and stuff that are on site that allow them to push their data directly to the cloud in a secure way, so that these enterprises can tap into the processing power that's on the cloud and the tools and visualizations that are on the cloud. So data collection is easier because you don't need to collect it on site first, and the tools are more rapidly evolving because they're managed by these massive IT companies that are constantly evolving this software to allow more interesting processing, visualizations more flexible, and new types of insights can be drawn. And like,
Are you finding these big IT companies like Microsoft you mentioned there? They're mostly doing this as incentive for people to consume cloud services in general, right? It's almost like that's what's in it for them.
yeah.
Does that mean there's like ecosystem lock-ins?
Well, not really, because there are standards like MQTT and AMQP, where the type of data or the protocol that the devices used is not owned by Microsoft. It's just kind of supported by Microsoft. So while it might be easier to set up a device that says supports Microsoft IoT Hub on the label, it's not impossible. You're not locked into Microsoft Azure IoT Hub, for example. It is possible to run that on a different cloud services provider, or if you really want to set up, say, an MQTT broker like within your own network to ingest that information and then process it yourself. So I think the end user still has quite a few options there, and of course, their options include different products as well.
and Will, what happens if customers have some new services that are operating in the cloud, but then we still have to connect to on-prem devices, maybe like AV endpoints or other types of devices that only exist on a local network level?
Yeah, it's a very common requirement and an issue that we face, because obviously our service is very highly integrated with not just cloud services but on-site devices and sensors, and that adds a lot of value. So it's all about VPN, really. So usually there will already be some existing network that connects cloud networks to on-site networks. But if not, then generally an IPsec VPN would need to be created, which is becoming easier and easier nowadays with the services that are offered.
And to your point, this being a trend, I'm seeing this myself, that there's less of a need for these direct connections to devices on the local network because more things are becoming cloud services.
Yeah.
And like, for example, when we do like location tracking, it's often we're connecting to a cloud service like Meraki, and that it in turn connects to local wireless access points, but we talk to the cloud service.
Yeah,
And that's similar with desk sensors. We're usually connecting to a cloud service, not the endpoint. There is still a time and a place for direct endpoint connection, but there's definitely everything moving to the cloud.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Meraki was exactly the location that, exactly the example that I was going to give. Like previously, before Meraki, where it was Cisco CMX, the client would have to deploy their own CMX server and then manage that, and then they need to worry about the security overhead of that, and then their CMX, PlaceOS would need to talk to the CMX server on site, but with Meraki location services, we don't need to worry about that so much. We like PlaceOS server just receives Meraki location data as it becomes available. Meraki literally posts it to us, and we receive it. That just makes the integration so much easier. And as new versions become available, they're automatically available. Like you don't need to update your CMX server to the next version and then plan some scheduled outage or anything like that. And it's not just like these forward think really large and like IT companies that are really forward thinking. You expect like Cisco to have the best location services for networks, right? But it's also smaller companies. We're seeing desk sensors like Presec and VergeSense, either supporting Microsoft IoT Hub like Presec or VergeSense supporting having their own really excellently documented cloud API and working really well, and just making it super easy to securely and reliably provide desk booking and for PlaceOS to provide desk booking integrated with real-time sensor data on site.
So I think a good sort of topic that's related to this is control or processing on the edge, because every now and again there is still a user case for a secure local network and perhaps device communication happening on that network, not calling back to the cloud. Do you see this as just a temporary thing until everyone fully embraces the cloud, or is there always going to be a need for like a hybrid model with edge devices?
I think for some certain use cases, there will be some security requirement that's mandated by some higher authority within the enterprise for the processing of data, especially if it's not yet anonymized or something, to not just be encrypted if it's to be transferred off the network or off that specific service, but to be processed within that network before being stored or transferred elsewhere. And that's a pretty unique and interesting scenario. And I think like PlaceOS has a pretty unique, pretty new and interesting solution for that, which is called PlaceOS Edge. And it allows us to run drivers, modules on site within the local network and allow that real-time control and processing in a secure manner where the data or the status of the devices that are being integrated with are happening on that local network, while the main core instance may still be living, in the cloud where it's somewhere easier to manage. So it's exciting.
And in that case, we then become a cloud service for third parties to talk to that can then access those devices, right?
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
same way that you're talking about, sensors being on. You mentioned an example there that has a really good API for their cloud connection to their sensors. We essentially provide that to devices that are not on the cloud. So I think that's an interesting user case.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing more and more of that before. We didn't used to see it like a lot several years ago, but as kind of web development and REST APIs is becoming more pervasive in the industry, as it should, we're seeing that as we near the completion of a project, and someone, maybe the project manager or solution architect on that project says, wait, so you offer this REST API that's this and it's well documented. So can't we just do this? And by this I mean, it's a custom dashboard, like data dashboard. In one case, one example we have is like we delivered a visitor management solution, right? But they wanted to go beyond the kind of reporting that we offered out of the box, and they didn't want to engage us for another round of scoping or projects or whatever. They had someone in-house who was working on that project and familiar with the system, and could easily just hook up Power BI to our REST API, and was able to, within a couple of days, create a dashboard for their visitor management that suited their specific needs internally.
I think that's important because many customers of ours, or any enterprise customer, quite often are the experts in data. Like, why would we create dashboards for them when they have a team of 5,000 data scientists?
Yeah, exactly. And we can only offer what we think you want. Like if you know what you want, then you can build it yourself for cheaper and better.
Yeah, this general trend of fully embracing the cloud, it's come a long way so quickly. If you look at some of our early projects, one of the early ones you were involved with, Will, like Rabobank in Australia, where I think in that project they didn't even give us an internet connection. Like that we had to. You had to go to site with your laptop to do anything. Like it wasn't even remote access, which is like just crazy to think of now that companies are fully embracing cloud connected services.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Like large enterprises like that have come a long way, and they've come to accept not just cloud computing for easier management of their servers and services, but also serverless solutions for deployment, like Kubernetes and containerization, obviously with Docker, and just getting more up to date in terms of IT tooling.
How do you find the learning curve for all of this? Because I've had to go through this myself, right? Like to a certain point, I knew how like a server worked on site, on premise, and then I had to learn about serverless, and then I had to learn about orchestration of services and containers, and it's quite a lot. And I know it to a certain level to be able to basically sell the solution. But for customers, is this becoming really complicated? How do they learn this, or is this just where the IT industry is moving? So it's just part of the job to know all of this stuff.
It's becoming, it is becoming just part of the job and more pervasive as new technologies, become more common. Initially there's a lack of skills in that particular tool set, whether that be containerization or whether it's Kubernetes. But as we'll see over the next few years, people become more familiar with it, as we did with with Rabobank, where people may not have been familiar with specialized cloud service containerization at that time. Now we're seeing enterprises become quite familiar with Kubernetes and say, oh yeah, we'll just put you onto our Kubernetes team or whatever. And that's why we at PlaceOS, we're always trying to be like a little bit ahead of that and have that kind of deployment option if it has some kind of significant benefit, like ready and waiting for you when you're ready.
Yeah,
I like that comment, Will, about we have to be ahead of the curve. And I'm seeing that when speaking with some of our more recent customers, where we say these are the methods in which we're able to deploy the product. And even if customers don't have those skill sets internally to set up the infrastructure in that way, they're often quite open to growing their teams if we are following that industry best practice, and it gives them that opportunity to grow and develop those new skill sets internally if that's their choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one thing we've chatted about, well, quite a lot is visitor experience. So I sort of turn to you as the visitor experience expert based on some projects you've done there in Hong Kong. One of those trends I'm seeing is the ease of authentication. Can you touch on that and what you're seeing there?
Yeah. So what we've been trying to do is allow not just internal staff to be able to integrate in a secure and standardized manner through the enterprise SSO, but we're trying to allow external guests to securely authenticate and authorize them only for specific things that they would have access to. Services like letting the enterprise know their own personal preferences, or letting the enterprise know that they've arrived on site using the PlaceOS platform. Because obviously, like PlaceOS, because it's an authenticated REST API, those API services are only allowed for authenticated users. So using tools like JWT and Azure AD, like business, I forgot what it's called, but Azure AD guests, basically. It allows you to invite external people and let them authenticate with their own separate enterprise SSO services to your organization. So company A can invite someone from company B and be sure that it's that person from company B, because they authenticated with company B's SSO provider, whether that's Microsoft or Google or whatever. And then PlaceOS can offer whatever services that company A decides to provide to that external person from company B. And the most common use case for this is for visitor management.
Yeah, I guess it's as simple as if we know who someone is, we can start tailoring the experience for them. So if we know what organization they're from, we can start maybe cross-referencing other systems to make that a more seamless journey through the building. And we couldn't do that before. And you certainly can't do that if you just have someone fill in a form with their name and enter your company manually. That's not very intelligent. That's not a very good user experience. And I think that was the starting point for us, was how do we at least automate the check-in experience? But then now we're thinking a bit beyond that. How do we not need a check-in experience and just allow them to come through the building as if they're an employee, essentially?
Yeah. And then how do we do that in a way where there's still some data captured so that some business intelligence can be generated, and so that the experience can be improved in the future?
Sort of a final question I was going to ask in this session is, you now live and work in Hong Kong, and you're doing projects all over the world. But how are you seeing that region compared to other regions we work in? What's happening in Hong Kong that's different to Australia, for example?
Yeah, so obviously, like, Hong Kong is one of the cities where the real estate price here is extremely high. We're like probably the highest, or one of the highest in the world. So there's a constant kind of importance put on making the most use of the space. So intelligence about how the space is being utilized, and whether it's optimized for the kinds of interactions that are taking place the most is on the highest list on everyone's priority. And so, like, what we're seeing in PlaceOS is that we're not just offering the normal kinds of services where it's like room booking and that kind of stuff, but we're trying to capture as much data as possible about how the space is being used, so that real estate decisions can be made, like, oh, we need an extra floor, or, oh, make that department bigger and this department smaller, or oh, actually the best size meeting rooms is 2-person meeting rooms instead of 4-person meeting rooms, and we want to, like, cancel some bookings if they're no show. So it's kind of the stuff that we've been trying to deliver to enterprises in Australia and that kind of stuff. But it's kind of like an essential requirement here rather than an optional extra. And they're looking beyond that. They're looking for more as well. Like, how do we make a desk booking experience where you're not just booking a desk for a whole day and then only appearing there for 3 hours? How about they can book it for only a part of a day, or they book for part of the day, but then if there's no occupancy detected, then that desk becomes free. Or we implement some check-in and check-out thing with our QR code scan. And it really depends on the enterprise how much what are the business rules they want to implement in terms of the interaction that's required from the user, whether they want it to be completely transparent at the cost of the amount of data that's gathered, or whether they want the end user to actually take some steps in order for the enterprise to have more data and make better decisions about the space. Yeah.
Which sometimes people overlook that point. Like, sometimes having the employee in a workplace solution give you the information manually is, one, high quality data because it's very specific and given by a person. And secondly, very cheap to do that. You don't have to roll out any sensors or technology or integrate with anything. So I think there's always a making that decision for each scenario is very important. And there's things that make it easier, like QR codes, for example, make it easier to launch a web form to then enter more data, or to not have to do anything except hit the QR code, perhaps. And in Hong Kong, when I've traveled there myself, way before COVID, you see how widely adopted QR codes are everywhere you go. Like, you pay for things at a cafe with a QR code, and I think that's what I saw in that market before anywhere else. Like the ease of loading the right interface at the right time, and then making sure that anything you're delivering to an end user has context, but you can still allow users to take steps. It doesn't always have to be automated, even though sometimes that should be the aim. There's this balance that you always have to take.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to use the word balance as well. There's like, each enterprise has a different acceptable balance that they want to implement in terms of the amount of data that's collected versus the amount of friction that would be introduced to the user in order to collect that amount of data, versus the cost of installing all these sensors and stuff to which technically might be able to offer both, right? But then how much is that going to cost? So it's really about striking a balance.
Yeah, and as Hong Kong's an interesting market, as you said, like anywhere dense, and Australia is somewhat dense because people mostly live in the cities, so the cities are dense, even though this country is huge. But the US, for example, there's not that many dense cities really. They have a lot of sprawl. They have a lot of campuses rather than high-rise buildings in certain places, which has its own challenges. But it's not the same real estate challenge that we've seen in Hong Kong and similar markets like Singapore. So that's what I think is great about PlaceOS as the company size we are, quite small compared to the companies we work with or for, but we're working globally, and we can learn things from one market and apply it to the other, or get a head start based on this input from Hong Kong. And then as soon as someone wants this in another dense city, we have an understanding of their needs.
Yeah, I think another trend here that I've seen is like satellite offices, like really small offices, like in like more all over the city, as opposed to like massive offices in the center of the city. And then the challenge they face about, but we want to offer the same kind of services that the main office offers. And obviously cloud's just such a great solution for that, in terms of if we deploy the desk booking service or the sensor service to the cloud, that immediately makes it available in all the offices, right? All they need is an internet connection. So
that's where that's why it's no accident we partner with companies like Cisco, because if you package like the cloud service with the Wi-Fi and everything's under Meraki or DNA Spaces, and with that comes access to other cloud services such as PlaceOS, then you literally have a package you can enable at remote offices. And that's a trend happening all over the place because of COVID, having offices closer to where the people live. I know that's something that is that I've actually spoken to Alan in Hong Kong. He was on an episode of the podcast years ago now, and we're chatting about that specifically in Hong Kong, not always having the office on Hong Kong Island in the CBD, but having it out in the new territories where more people live, but having a hybrid model where that might be within the residential tower. There's like a floor of co-working, but it's not co-working like WeWork. It's co-working where you have access to all of your corporate systems, even from a hot desk. So it's a lot of interesting things we can all learn from Hong Kong. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I think that wraps up all the topics we wanted to chat about today. Anything else to add, Sabrina? Anything else you want to end with, Will?
No, I've just been listening attentively and learning a few things along the way. So thanks, Will.
Yeah, no worries. It's interesting in this day and age how the focus on remote work is obviously stronger than ever. I mean, hopefully we'll all be able to travel again soon and see each other face to face. But I think even with this new kind of paradigm of working, we've proven over the past 1 year that we can all make it happen, and that life goes on.